And next up, we've got Charles Taituha, who comes from the King Country. You'd never guess it by the look of him, but he's had 20 years working in the rural servicing space. He's so youthful looking. That's where I was going with it. Don't worry. He's had a variety of roles, and he's now has his own whenua advisory business, but he also supports many industry good and government organisations. So very welcome, Charles.
Kia ora, Sinead, and the flattery will speed up my presentation too, thanks. Ko rangi e tū nei, ko papa e hora nei, mā tini mā mano e rapa te whai. Kua whai te māramatanga, kua whai ngā hua, kia puta ki te whai ao, ki te ao mārama, hui e tā ki e. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou, e te rangatira kurua, ko Walira, ko Ingrid, tēnā kurua. To the rest of our colleagues from NZACCC, both the advisory groups, the stakeholder, toi hau, this has been another awesome event, and it's been great to see you all, and to everybody else, all our other whānau here trying to work on these complex solutions for our ag sector. Kia kaha, kia maia, kia mana wanui. Kia ora. Just quickly about me, as Sinead alluded to, I started with Wrightson's as a 16-year-old in Te Kuiti in 2003. January the 6th, I remember the day. It was the start of my, wasn't the start of my dream. I wanted to be a shearer, but realised that was pretty hard, real fast. My father also realised it was very hard for me and suggested that Bill Harrison, a livestock agent in Piopio, would have a really good job for you. You enjoy driving around, you enjoy talking to people, and you enjoy spending other people's money. So that was my life. Just the photo here, that was the photo of it was the second week of lockdown in Otorohanga. We had just purchased our house. We'd also just been made redundant, but the smiles were immense. I look at that photo and I always think back, shit, things could be worse. Because right at that time, we'd just taken on a huge mortgage and we were wondering what the hell we were going to do. But we had each other. And I think this is sort of a bit of a theme of my kōrero today. We have everyone in this room, we have each other, we also have our others, our farmers and people out there on the whenua. We have us all together, so we need to keep moving forward. We can't give up, and we can't also sit back and hope others will do it. That's my partner Carmen, that's my little girl Brooke, and my big girl Tashina. That was, Brooke was 5, I think, in that photo. And Tashina was, it was 4 years ago. How old is she now? She's actually, she just turned 14, believe it or not. So this is my why. The whenua is also a big part of me, of where we come from. We're whenua people. Our marae is a big part of me, but it's those 3 people there that keep me going. Titiro whakamuri ki anga whakamua. Now, I'm going to not give you any graphs, and I'm not going to give you any flash numbers. I'm going to talk to you in whakatauki. Now, this whakatauki, to me, explained to me, is it's to look back and reflect so you can move forward. That old fella there was another one of my 100 poppers I had growing up as a kid. His name was Te Kanua. My dad called him Ted the Gears because he had all the gears. He was a very entrepreneurial man. He was the first ever contract shearing gang in the King Country in the 1960s. And he figured that was great because the contract crew, he would charge them a price. And because he had 14 children, a number of them being sons and some whāngai sons who all could shear, he didn't have to feed them. So the cocky had to give a crate of beer and a mutton every day, and that's what they lived on for 6 weeks at a time. And Papa Ted built a hell of a war chest to be able to grow his whenua operations and help his kids drive their business entrepreneurship, which the learnings from him I still remember now. He died at 93. He was tough as old boots, and he ended up getting Alzheimer's, and he went wandering off one day, and we had helicopters out finding him, and he wandered in the house. He was covered in shit and pig scraps and all sorts of stuff. And he'd been up in the pigsty pushing all of, Dad had these big drums of pig scraps, and he was just pushing them all over to feed the pigs. And it was a hell of a mess. Anyway, he come inside, and everyone was just, he didn't know, he didn't understand. And he just walks inside, lit up a smoke, sat down and poured himself a beer, and looked like there was nothing wrong. And, I look back on some of the things I learned from him is you make plenty of mistakes, but you can't dwell on them. You just got to get up and keep going. So that's sort of something I hope that we all take away from this. Minister Shaw, and that I was feeling a bit down after that kōrero yesterday, and now we're starting to build up to this, I suppose, what do you call it, a precipice, to be able to actually make some change, because there's a fair bit of hui, not a lot of dui. And that's a segue to this kōrero. Now, this whakatauki here to me is, and this place, this is my marae. This is Te Waipā Toto. The whare on your left-hand side was built in 1896. The whare on the right-hand side was built in 1986. Was born, opened the day I was born. So that place there to me, for how the whānau built that, was 18 whānau got together and mortgaged their homes to build that whare. And one of the kōrero that probably I take off that whakatauki is that we can do lots of good things together. As we saw on Simon Upton's kōrero today, we add all those things together. Yeah, I get what he means, that we never should have had all the money 10 years ago, but there's no point dwelling on it. Let's move on. They were also in government for some of that too, so it was a bit of a pointed arrow, I felt. So when I talk about the mahi a te mahi, I sort of give you some examples of people and trust that I've dealt with over my pretty short time in the role I've had. We have a number of trusts within the Central Plateau that now work together around, so they've reduced their breeding cow numbers, and they're using the whānau who own dairy farms to be able to produce calves for them to be able to finish. Now, the original numbers and stuff that we sort of first looked at regarding the greenhouse gas number, and some of those farms, those breeding sheep and beef breeding properties, were not very high in regards to per hectare greenhouse gas numbers. They were only sort of around 1.8 to 2 tonnes a hectare of carbon of CO2 equivalents. That's not big compared to George's 14 and 14 and a half. The problem is they're 5,000 hectares. It's the scale and the size. So even though they weren't really a problem in the scheme of things when you looked at it from a per hectare basis, but if you accumulate all those together, they realised there was issues. So we worked with our dairy whānau. They now provide them beef bulls to go over their herd. They finished those bulls. They've reduced 500 breeding cows and increased their bull numbers by about 700. They've increased their net profit considerably. And it was hard. It was that legacy, and I'll tell you what, it took me more than anybody to get my head around it, because I love big black cows, and that's just my own, how we were brought up. But we have to make these changes, and there's things that we just have to, the romance sometimes just has to be parked aside for the economics and the betterment of others. So that's something I think we would say without having to go to things like planting heaps more trees, which we have planted trees. We don't use that in our calculation. The trees are a separate entity, essentially, even though it's inside the boundary. So we've worked on the farm, what it produces. We don't want to look at all the sequestration yet, otherwise we might start getting lazy and not looking at some real big problems. So we've tried to do that, and then it probably sounds a bit of a cop-out, but if we feel we're not going to make it, well, then we can always bring them in eventually. But at the moment, that's not what we're focused on. He toka tū moana ara he toka a he toa rongonui. Now, this is something that, this is a whakatauki regarding being steadfast, having a hell of a lot of integrity, and not moving for anything. Now, I look at, take these examples from people like my father, who was the chair of our marae for 40 plus years, and he ruled with an iron fist, and my whanaunga up in the top left corner of the building probably know that more than anybody, but it's about integrity. You have to stick to what you say you're going to do. and you've got to do it. And I get where Dr. Carr and others are saying if we let everybody just sort of mull over what might be good, what might not be good, and have time, we have to stay what we're going to do, and we have to do it. And that's just for our own self. Who cares about the rest of the world? But if you can't sleep in bed straight at night because you haven't done what you said you were going to do, that's probably a harder thing to deal with than the rest of the world saying we don't like you. So I'm really, we're really fixated with the trust and other farms that we work with, even my own farms around that. So we have to do as we say we're going to do. Our whanaunga there, Wally, there you can see part of your range is off to the left-hand side of that photo. That was actually on Te Hape and looks back through to the maunga. E kore au e ngaro he kākono I ruia mai I rangiatea. Now this is something that, so that's my little girl when we lived in Gisborne. You know, I'll never be lost. I'm a seed sowing in rangiatea. Now rangiatea is this miracle place that we as Māori think of as where we come from. It grounds us to this whenua, it grounds us to this world. So one of the things that we've stuck to around that is that if, and it's a bit of a catch cry of my brothers, which cousin Taituha's going to laugh, if Māori succeed, New Zealand cannot fail, and we've actually kept on with that. We're at the bottom end of a whole lot of really bad statistics, not just whenua, but outside of whenua, because whenua is about people. You can't be tangata whenua without any whenua, and you can't be tangata whenua without any tangata, which is people. So we focus our efforts on grounding our people in our whenua, understanding our businesses. That's one of the big things we've been through. We've taken 40 trusts over a small amount of years, about 2 or 3 years, and with the help of other consultants around the country, is to get people to understand your business, understand your numbers, understand where you fit, and then you can make decisions thereafter. And this is my last slide. Whatu ngarongaro te tangata toitū te whenua. If man shall disappear, land will stay. That's the reality of my world as a Māori landowner, as a trustee, as a committee of management, and also as a father. We can do all of this, we've got to make all these decisions with the thought that we may not be here to reap those benefits. We also may leave a disastrous issue for our kids to clean up. So what I do employ and what we try and stick to is very much, and people may get hoha with us in the Māori sector because we take a while to make a decision. But when you're making a decision for your mokopuna's mokopuna, it's not that easy. It's not that easy to say, right, I'll make a decision today, it might affect my capital gains or it might affect my cash flow today. One of the things, it's a bit of a joke, but I've got some uncles who did, I won't say what they did, but they were just, they might have been hopeless. I'll just put it there. It's a hypothetical thing, maybe. And they had kids, and you know, you're tarred with the hopelessness, even though it was your father. Like it's a hard thing to deal with in Māoridom, but you know, it's a reality. So we have to make these decisions wisely. We also we have to realise that the whenua gives us sustenance, not just in pūtea or money, not just in kai, but in our wairua. It keeps us grounded, keeps us who we are. So the word whenua too has a dual meaning. Whenua is your petua, your umbilical cord, and when you're born, you bury that in the whenua. So it's that sustenance from your mother or Mother Earth. It's the same thing. So taking those views into our decision making and into the future, I haven't given you a lot of great answers, but I mean, I just think of things that way. That's our maunga in the background, puriora. That's just on the edge of Te Hape as well. When you look back through that whenua, if that's what 2050 looks like, I'm happy to keep it. Like that's the way how I want 2050 to look like. I want my kids to be able to stand in that same place and look back that way. So that's it for me, and thank you.
Thanks, Charles.